A millionaire demanded that a humble elderly man be kicked out because he reeked of animals, but she had no idea who the elderly man really was. On the outskirts of the picturesque town of Sonoma, California, sprawled the Oak Grove farm owned by 70-year-old Harold Thompson. His calloused hands and sun-weathered face told the story of a life dedicated to the land. Despite his age, Harold rose each day at dawn, ready to work the fields that had been his home and livelihood for decades. One spring morning, Harold decided to make an unusual trip to San Francisco. His granddaughter Sarah would soon graduate from university, and he wanted to buy her a special gift. Dressed in his best plaid shirt and least-worn boots, the elderly farmer climbed into his old pickup truck and set off on the 2-hour journey to the city. Meanwhile, in the heart of San Francisco, Olivia Blackwell, a successful 45-year-old businesswoman, was preparing for another day of conquests in the business world. As the owner of Pinnacle Developments, one of the region's most important construction companies, Olivia was known for her sharp business acumen and relentless determination. Fate brought them together at Golden Gate Boutique, an exclusive shop in downtown San Francisco. Harold, somewhat disoriented among the luxurious dresses and accessories, was looking for something that might please his granddaughter. Olivia, on the other hand, had entered the store in search of a suit for an important business meeting. The boutique's air conditioning wasn't enough to dissipate the scent of earth and animals that Harold carried with him. Olivia, accustomed to refined environments and the smell of expensive perfumes, wrinkled her nose in disgust at the odor. "Excuse me?" Olivia said to one of the saleswomen, not bothering to lower her voice. "Don't you think you should have some sort of filter for the clientele you let in? This smell is unbearable." Harold, who was nearby examining a delicate silk scarf, felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. He had never felt so out of place before. The saleswoman, visibly uncomfortable, approached Harold. "Sir, I'm very sorry, but—" "Don't worry, miss," Harold interrupted with dignity. "I was just leaving." And with slow but firm steps, Harold left the store, leaving behind an awkward silence and Olivia's satisfied gaze. What neither of them could imagine at that moment was that this unfortunate encounter would be just the beginning of a story that would change their lives forever. Harold returned to his farm empty-handed and heavy-hearted. For the first time in many years, he questioned the value of his work and his place in a world that seemed to have no room for men like him. However, seeing the fields he had cultivated with so much love, he remembered his late father's words. "The land doesn't judge, son. It only bears fruit for those who work it with respect and dedication." Meanwhile, Olivia continued with her life of luxury and business, giving little importance to the boutique incident. For her, that old farmer was nothing more than a minor obstacle in her day, quickly forgotten among contracts and negotiations. Months passed, and life at Oak Grove continued its natural course. Harold focused on perfecting the innovative irrigation system he had been developing for years, a technique that promised to revolutionize agriculture in arid zones. His granddaughter Sarah, recently graduated with a degree in agricultural engineering, had moved to the farm to help her grandfather and learn from his vast experience. For her part, Olivia was at the peak of her career. Pinnacle Developments had won a bid to build a luxury resort complex on the outskirts of Sonoma. The project promised to be the most ambitious of her career. But there was a small obstacle. They needed to acquire more land to complete the resort area. And so, on a hot August afternoon, Olivia found herself driving down a dirt road towards Oak Grove Farm. Her advisors had informed her that this property was crucial for the project, and she was determined to acquire it at any price. As she arrived at the farm's entrance, Olivia couldn't help but be surprised by the beauty of the place. Green fields stretched as far as the eye could see, and the air was filled with the aroma of fertile earth and wildflowers. For a moment, she felt a pang of nostalgia for the summers she had spent on her grandparents' farm as a child. Harold was in the orchard when he heard the sound of a car approaching. Seeing the luxury vehicle, he immediately knew this wasn't a common visit. He took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead, preparing to greet the visitor. Olivia stepped out of the car, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit and heels that seemed out of place in the rural setting. Seeing Harold, a vague memory crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. "Good afternoon," she greeted with a firm voice. "I'm looking for the owner of this farm. I'm Olivia Blackwell from Pinnacle Developments." Harold looked at her intently for a moment, instantly recognizing her as the woman from the boutique. However, he decided not to mention the incident. "Good afternoon, Ms. Blackwell. I'm Harold Thompson, the owner of Oak Grove. How can I help you?" Olivia, not recognizing the old man, proceeded to explain the reason for her visit. She spoke of the economic benefits the resort complex would bring to the region, of how selling the farm would be a unique opportunity for Harold to secure a comfortable future. Harold listened patiently, his face impassive. When Olivia finished her speech, the old man simply said, "I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwell, but this land is not for sale. It's been my family's home for generations, and I intend for it to remain so." Olivia, accustomed to getting her way in negotiations, was about to insist when a voice interrupted the conversation. "Grandpa, have you seen Jake? We were supposed to—" Sarah stopped short upon seeing the visitor. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know we had company." Olivia turned to see the newcomer and her face paled. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "Mom," Sarah replied, equally surprised. The silence that followed was so dense it could almost be cut with a knife. Harold looked from one to the other, confused. "You two know each other?" Sarah, recovering from the surprise, replied, "Yes, Grandpa. She's Jake's mother, my boyfriend." At that moment, as if fate wanted to add another layer of complexity to the situation, a handsome young man of about 25 appeared on the path leading to the fields. "Sarah, honey, sorry I'm late. The traffic from San Francisco was—" Jake stopped upon seeing the scene in front of him. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Olivia, normally eloquent and self-assured, found herself speechless for the first time in a long while. Her son, her only son, was dating the granddaughter of the man whose land she planned to buy. And not just any man, but the same one she had humiliated months ago in a San Francisco boutique. Harold, observing the confusion and tension on everyone's faces, decided to take control of the situation. With the wisdom that only years can give, he invited everyone into the house. "I think we have a lot to talk about," he said calmly, "and nothing gets resolved on an empty stomach. Sarah, why don't you prepare some coffee and bring out the cookies you baked yesterday?" As everyone headed towards the house, a cool breeze blew over the fields of Oak Grove, as if nature itself wanted to calm the mood and set the stage for the revelations that were about to come. The interior of Harold's house was a perfect reflection of its owner, simple, welcoming, and full of history. The walls were adorned with black and white photographs of past generations. Antique farming tools hung as silent witnesses to decades of hard work, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the smell of wood and earth. Olivia sat uncomfortably in an old armchair, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Jake and Sarah sat together on a small sofa, their hands intertwined in a gesture of mutual support. Harold occupied his favorite chair, a worn leather seat that seemed molded to his shape after years of use. "Well," Harold began after everyone had a cup of coffee in their hands, "it seems we have a lot to talk about." Olivia, regaining some of her usual composure, decided to take the initiative. "Harold," she said, deliberately avoiding using the respectful "Mr." that the old man deserved, "I understand this situation is unexpected, but business is business. My offer for your land still stands, and I assure you it's more than generous." Jake looked at his mother in disbelief. "Are you serious, Mom? You came here to buy Sarah's farm?" "It's not Sarah's farm, it's her grandfather's," Olivia corrected coldly. "And yes, it's a business opportunity that would benefit everyone." Sarah, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Benefit everyone? How exactly would it benefit my grandfather to lose the home he's had all his life? Or me to lose the place where I grew up, and to which I've returned to continue my family's legacy?" Harold raised a hand, asking for calm. "Ms. Blackwell," he said in a quiet but firm voice, "I appreciate your offer, but as I told you before, this land is not for sale. It's not just a property to me. It's my life, my history, and my future." Olivia was about to argue when she noticed something in Harold's eyes, a glimmer of recognition that suddenly made her feel exposed. "We've met before, haven't we?" she asked, although deep down she already knew the answer. The old man nodded slowly, That's right, ma'am, in a store in San Francisco a few months ago. Well, let's say it wasn't a pleasant encounter. Jake and Sarah exchanged confused looks. But before they could ask, Olivia stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. I didn't come here to rehash the past or discuss family matters. I came to do business. What happened in that store, Mom? Jake asked, his voice laden with suspicion. Harold, seeing the discomfort on Olivia's face, decided to intervene. It doesn't matter, son. What matters is the present and the future. But Olivia, feeling that she was losing control of the situation, decided to counterattack. The future. What future can there be in this outdated farm? The world is moving forward, and places like this will be left behind. My project would bring progress, jobs, tourism. Isn't that what you want for your community? Sarah, unable to contain herself any longer, stood up. Progress? You call destroying fertile land to build luxury hotels progress? This farm isn't outdated, Miss Blackwell. My grandfather has developed irrigation techniques that could revolutionize agriculture in arid zones. That's true progress. Harold smiled proudly at his granddaughter's words, but his smile quickly faded when a coughing fit shook him. Everyone in the room fell silent, watching with concern as the old man struggled to catch his breath. When the coughing finally subsided, Harold looked around with a resigned expression. I suppose it's time for another revelation, he said in a tired voice. A few months ago, doctors diagnosed me with advanced stage lung cancer. They gave me 6 months to a year to live. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, rushed to her grandfather's side and hugged him tightly. Jake, visibly shocked, didn't know what to say. Olivia, for her part, stood motionless, her face an impenetrable mask. Why didn't you tell me before, Grandpa? Sarah sobbed. Harold gently stroked his granddaughter's hair. I didn't want to worry you, my dear. Besides, there's still a lot of work to do here. Olivia, recovering from the surprise, saw an opportunity. Harold, she said, her voice softer than usual, all the more reason you should consider my offer. You could spend your last months without worries, in comfort. Jake looked at his mother in disbelief. How can you think about business at a time like this? Harold, however, didn't seem offended. In fact, a small smile appeared on his lips. Ms. Blackwell, I appreciate your concern, but my comfort is here on my land. I wouldn't trade my last days among these fields for all the riches in the world. Olivia, for the first time in a long while, found herself speechless. The old man's dignity and serenity in the face of death completely disconcerted her. Grandpa, said Sarah, wiping away her tears, you can't keep working in your condition. You need to rest, take care of yourself. On the contrary, my dear, Harold replied, work is what keeps me alive, and now more than ever I need to finish my irrigation project. It's my legacy, not just for you and this land, but for all farmers struggling against drought. Jake, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Thompson, what exactly is this irrigation system about? The old man's face lit up at the question. With renewed energy, he began to explain his project, an innovative system that combined ancient Native American techniques with modern technology, capable of reducing water consumption by 60% without affecting productivity. As Harold spoke, Olivia couldn't help but feel intrigued. Her business mind began to see possibilities she hadn't considered before. It's fascinating, Olivia said when the old man finished his explanation. But have you considered how to take this beyond your farm? A system like this could benefit farmers across the country, even internationally. Harold nodded. I've thought about it, but implementing it on a large scale would require resources I don't have. Besides, with the time I have left... Perhaps, Olivia interrupted, surprising herself. We could reach a different agreement than the one I had in mind originally. Everyone in the room looked at her in surprise. What kind of agreement, Mum? Jake asked, with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Olivia took a deep breath before continuing. Instead of buying the land for a resort complex, what if we invest in developing and commercializing your irrigation system, Mr. Thompson? We could form a partnership. My resources and contacts, combined with your innovation and Sarah's agricultural knowledge, we could do something truly significant. The proposal fell like a bombshell in the room. Sarah and Jake exchanged looks of astonishment, while Harold scrutinized Olivia's face, looking for any sign of deception. Why the sudden change, Ms. Blackwell? the old man asked. Olivia hesitated for a moment, surprised by the honesty of her own response. Because I think it's the right thing to do. And because, unlike another resort complex, this could make a real difference in people's lives. Harold slowly rose from his chair and approached the window. He looked out at the fields that had been his entire life, and then turned back to the room, his eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and determination. "Ms. Blackwell," he finally said, "I think we have a lot to discuss." As the sun began to set over the fields of Oak Grove, a conversation that had begun with hostility and mistrust was transforming into the beginning of something new and promising. No one in that room could imagine how this unexpected alliance would change not only their lives, but those of countless farmers across America. The days following the revealing meeting in Harold's house were a whirlwind of activity. Olivia, accustomed to moving fast in the business world, surprised herself by immersing in the slower but equally intense rhythm of life on the farm. Each morning, before the sun peeked over the horizon, Harold was already up, ready to start his day. Despite his illness, he refused to stay in bed. "Work is the best medicine," he often said with a tired but determined smile. Sarah, torn between concern for her grandfather's health and excitement for the new project, became the bridge between Harold's traditional knowledge and Olivia's innovative ideas. Her studies in agricultural engineering proved invaluable in translating the old man's intuitive techniques into data and projections that Olivia could use to attract investors. Jake, for his part, discovered a passion he didn't know he had. Raised in the city and educated to follow in his mother's footsteps in the corporate world, he found himself fascinated by the complexity and beauty of sustainable agriculture. He spent hours with Harold, absorbing every bit of wisdom the old man was eager to share. Olivia, accustomed to seeing the world in terms of profits and losses, found herself questioning many of her long-held beliefs. Harold's dedication, the young people's enthusiasm, and the palpable connection between the people and the land began to awaken long-buried memories of her own childhood in the countryside. One afternoon, while reviewing the irrigation system plans in the barn converted into an improvised office, Olivia couldn't contain her curiosity. "Mr. Thompson," she asked, noticing how the respectful address had naturally emerged in recent days, "how did you come up with this system? It's brilliant." The old man smiled, his eyes shining with a creator's pride. "It was a process of many years, Ms. Blackwell. It began when I was young, watching my father and other farmers struggle against drought year after year. I thought there had to be a better way." He stood up with difficulty and approached an old photograph hanging on the wall. In it, a young Harold smiled alongside a group of serious-looking older men. "These are elders from the local Miwok tribe," he explained. "I spent months with them, learning their ancestral water conservation techniques. Then I studied irrigation systems from ancient civilizations like the Aztecs and the Anasazi. Each culture had its wisdom, and I realized that by combining them with modern technology, we could create something truly revolutionary." Olivia listened attentively, feeling increasingly humble in the face of the depth of the old man's knowledge and vision. "What impresses me most," Harold continued, "is how nature has its own balance systems. Our job isn't to dominate it, but to learn from it and work in harmony." These words resonated deeply with Olivia. For the first time in her career, she found herself thinking of success not just in terms of financial gains, but in the positive impact they could have on the world. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jake had formed a formidable team. Sarah's practical experience perfectly complemented Jake's business and technology skills. Together, they began developing an app that would allow farmers to monitor and control the irrigation system from their mobile phones. One night, while working late at the house, Jake paused and looked at Sarah with a mixture of admiration and love. "You know, I never thought I'd end up falling in love with a farm girl," he said with a smile. Sarah playfully punched him in the arm. "And I never thought a city boy would understand the importance of this. I guess we've both surprised each other." They looked at each other for a moment, and without saying another word, they knew their relationship had reached a new level of depth and understanding. As the weeks passed, the project began to take shape. The first prototypes of the irrigation system were installed in a section of the farm, and the results were astonishing. The plants grew stronger and healthier, using significantly less water. Olivia, using her contacts in the business world, managed to attract the attention of several potential investors. She organized a presentation at the farm where Harold, Sarah, and Jake would explain the system and show the preliminary results. On the day of the presentation, Oak Grove Farm was buzzing with activity. Men and women in suits mingled with farm workers, creating a surprising but promising contrast. Harold, dressed in his best shirt and a new hat, stood before the group of investors. Despite his illness, his voice was strong and clear when he began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "what you're about to see today is not just an irrigation system. It's a way of honoring the wisdom of our ancestors while embracing the future. It's a way to ensure that our children and grandchildren can continue to cultivate this land, feeding our country and the world." As Harold spoke, Olivia couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. She saw in the investors' eyes the same awe and respect she had felt when she truly understood the scope of this project. The presentation was a resounding success. The investors were impressed not only by the technology, but by the passion and knowledge that emanated from the entire team. By the end of the day, they had funding commitments that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. That night, as the sun set over the fields of Oak Grove, the team gathered on the house porch to celebrate. Olivia, holding a cup of coffee, looked around and realized how much she had changed in such a short time. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with an emotion she rarely showed, "I want to thank you, not just for this project, but for opening my eyes." The old man looked at her with a kind smile. "There's nothing to thank me for, Olivia. Sometimes life takes us down unexpected paths to teach us the most important lessons." Sarah and Jake, sitting together on the porch steps, shared a knowing look. At that moment, Jake knew he had made a decision. He stood up and, to everyone's surprise, knelt in front of Sarah. Taking a small box from his pocket, he opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "these last few months have been the most incredible of my life. I've discovered a passion I didn't know I had, and I've seen a side of you that has made me fall even more deeply in love. Would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Sarah, with tears in her eyes, looked at Jake and then at her grandfather and Olivia. In their faces she saw joy, surprise, and above all, love. "Yes," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Jake placed the ring on Sarah's finger, applause and congratulations filled the air. Harold, with tears in his eyes, hugged his granddaughter and then Jake. Olivia, observing the scene, felt a mix of emotions: joy for her son, some fear at the idea of being a mother-in-law, but above all, a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. As the celebration continued, Harold approached Olivia. "It seems our families will be united in more ways than one," he said with a smile. Olivia nodded, returning his smile. "It seems so. Who would have thought a few months ago? Life has a curious way of bringing together the paths that should be united," the old man replied. "Now, we have an exciting future ahead, both for our families and for this project." As the night progressed and the stars shone over the fields of Oak Grove, everyone felt they were on the brink of something big. A new chapter was beginning, not just for them, but potentially for farmers across America and beyond. The following months were a whirlwind of activity at Oak Grove Farm. The irrigation system project was advancing by leaps and bounds, with pilot tests extending to neighboring farms and generating promising results. Olivia had put all her business experience at the service of the project, negotiating agreements with suppliers and securing distribution channels. However, as the project grew, so did the challenges. Harold's health began to deteriorate more rapidly than expected. Although he strived to stay active and participate in the system's development, it became more evident each day that his time was limited. One October morning, as the cold began to seep into their bones, Harold collapsed in the field. Sarah found him unconscious among the rows of corn, and with Jake's help, they quickly took him to the nearest hospital in Sonoma. The diagnosis was devastating. The cancer had spread more than anticipated. The doctors gave them the news they had feared so much. Harold had, at most, a couple of months to live. The news fell like a weight on everyone. Sarah, heartbroken, spent every free moment by her grandfather's hospital bed. Jake divided his time between supporting his fiancée and keeping the project running. Olivia, for her part, found herself dealing with emotions she hadn't experienced in years. One afternoon, while Sarah was resting at home, Olivia decided to visit Harold. She found him sitting in his hospital bed, looking out the window towards the hills that surrounded Sonoma. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly as she entered, "how are you feeling today?" The old man turned to her with a tired but warm smile. "Ah, Olivia, better now that I have company. These hospitals can be very lonely places." Olivia sat next to the bed, feeling uncomfortable. She had never been good at dealing with illness or death. "The project, it's progressing well," she began, unsure of what to say. "The results from the pilot tests are very promising." Harold nodded. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, Olivia, when I started developing this system, I never imagined it would go this far. I thought it would be something small just for our farm and maybe some neighbors." "It's much more than that now," Olivia replied. "It could change the lives of thousands of farmers." "And all thanks to you," said Harold, surprising Olivia. "Without your business vision, without your resources, this would never have left Oak Grove." Olivia felt a lump in her throat. I don't know what to say. When I came to your farm that day, I was only thinking about buying the land for my resort project. I never imagined—" "Life has curious ways of teaching us, don't you think?" Harold interrupted with a smile. "Sometimes our greatest failures lead us to our greatest successes." Olivia nodded, remembering that day in the San Francisco boutique. "Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize for how I treated you that day in the store. I was cruel and arrogant." The old man took her hand, surprising her with the strength that still remained in his grip. "There's nothing to forgive, Olivia. We all make mistakes. What's important is how we learn from them, and how we choose to act afterwards." At that moment, Olivia felt something break inside her. Tears she had held back for years began to fall down her cheeks. "How can you be so kind?" she asked between sobs. "After how I treated you, how I've acted all my life." Harold looked at her with compassion. "Because I've lived long enough to know that resentment only poisons the soul. And because I see the change in you, Olivia. I see how you've opened your heart, how you've embraced this project and our family." Olivia wiped away her tears, feeling vulnerable but strangely liberated. "Thank you," she said simply. "No, thank you," Harold replied, "for giving this old farmer the chance to see his dream come true before he goes." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, not about business or the project, but about life, lessons learned, hopes and dreams. When Olivia finally left, she felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Meanwhile, at the farm, Sarah and Jake faced their own challenges. Harold's absence was felt in every corner of Oak Grove, and the pressure of keeping the project running while dealing with the pain of the impending loss was overwhelming. One night, after a long day of work, Sarah collapsed into Jake's arms. "I don't know if I can do this," she sobbed. "Grandpa has always been the heart of this place. How are we going to move forward without him?" Jake hugged her tightly, feeling his own tears threatening to fall. "We'll do it together," he said softly. "Your grandfather has taught us so much. He's given us the tools to continue his legacy." Sarah looked at him, her eyes bright with tears. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I disappoint everyone?" "That's not going to happen," Jake replied firmly. "You're the strongest person I know, Sarah, and you're not alone. You have me, we have my mother, we have the whole team we've formed. We'll honor Mr. Thompson's vision together." At that moment, as they consoled each other under the starry California sky, Sarah and Jake reaffirmed their commitment, not just to each other, but to the project and to Harold's legacy. The following days were a delicate balance between keeping the project running and spending time with Harold in the hospital. The old man, despite his physical weakness, maintained his indomitable spirit. Each visit became a lesson, whether about agriculture, about life, or about how to face death with dignity and peace. One afternoon, as Sarah and Jake were telling him about the latest developments in the project, Harold interrupted them with an unexpected request. "I want you to get married here," he said, his voice weak but determined. "On the farm, before I go." Sarah and Jake looked at each other, surprised. "But Grandpa," Sarah began, "there's no time to plan a wedding, and you need to rest, regain your strength." Harold shook his head. My dear, we both know I don't have much time left. I don't need a big ceremony. I just want to see you united, to see that the love that has blossomed on our land bears fruit. Jake took Sarah's hand, and then Harold's. If that's what you wish, we'll do it. We'll get married at Oak Grove with a simple ceremony full of love. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, nodded. Yes, Grandpa. We'll do it for you, for us, for the future we're building together. The news of the impending wedding spread quickly. Olivia, surprised at first, threw herself fully into the preparations with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including herself. Farm workers, neighbors, and even the project investors offered to help. In a matter of days, Oak Grove was transformed. A simple but beautiful altar was erected in the field where Harold had collapsed as a symbol of rebirth and hope. Wildflowers from the region adorned every corner, and the aroma of freshly baked bread and traditional stews filled the air. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp. Harold, determined to be present, was carefully transferred from the hospital. Seated in a wheelchair with a hand-woven blanket over his legs, he watched with bright eyes as his beloved farm filled with life and joy. Sarah, dressed in a simple white dress adorned with traditional Native American-inspired embroidery, walked towards the altar on her father's arm. Jake was waiting for her, his face a mixture of nerves and absolute happiness. Olivia, standing next to Harold, felt an emotion she hadn't experienced in years. She saw in her son's eyes a love and determination that filled her with pride. When the justice of the peace pronounced Sarah and Jake husband and wife, a chorus of applause and cheers rose over the fields of Oak Grove. Harold, with tears of joy rolling down his wrinkled cheeks, felt his heart could burst with happiness. The celebration that followed was a unique blend of tradition and modernity, just like the project that had united them all. There were traditional dances and modern music, home-cooked food and sophisticated cocktails. Local farmers toasted alongside city executives, united by the vision of a better future for American agriculture. As the party continued, Harold called Sarah, Jake, and Olivia to his side. "My dears," he said, his voice weak but full of emotion, "today you've made one of my greatest dreams come true. Seeing my granddaughter happily married, seeing our families united, seeing this project flourishing, I couldn't ask for more from life." He took Sarah and Jake's hands and joined them with Olivia's. "Together, you will carry this legacy forward. Not just the irrigation system, but the legacy of love for the land, respect for tradition, and vision for the future." Olivia, with tears in her eyes, squeezed everyone's hands. "We will, Mr. Thompson. I promise we'll honor everything you've taught us." As the sun set over the fields of Oak Grove, bathing the scene in a warm golden glow, everyone felt they were on the brink of a new beginning. The wedding was not just the union of Sarah and Jake, but the start of a new chapter in the history of Oak Grove, a story of love, innovation, and hope for the future of American agriculture. The months following the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. The irrigation system project was advancing by leaps and bounds, surpassing even the most optimistic expectations. Farms across California began adopting the technology, and the results were astounding. More abundant crops, lower water consumption, and renewed hope among farmers. Harold, though physically weaker by the day, remained an inexhaustible source of wisdom and motivation. From his bed in the Oak Grove farmhouse, where he had insisted on spending his last days, he continued to advise the team and share his vision. One spring afternoon, as Oak Grove's fields were covered with wildflowers, Harold called Sarah, Jake, and Olivia to his room. "My dears," he said in a weak but affectionate voice, "I feel my time is approaching, but I'm not sad. I've lived to see my dream come true, and I know I'm leaving Oak Grove and our project in the best hands." Sarah, with tears in her eyes, took her grandfather's hand. "Grandpa, we still need you. There's so much to learn from you." Harold smiled tenderly. "My girl, everything you need to know is already in your heart. You are the guardian of our land now, Jake," he said, turning to his grandson-in-law. "Take care of her and our legacy. I know you have the vision to take this project beyond what I could imagine." Jake nodded, squeezing Sarah's hand. "I will, Mr. Thompson. I promise we'll honor your vision." Finally, Harold looked at Olivia. "Olivia, I can never thank you enough for believing in this old farmer. You've brought resources and knowledge that have made the impossible possible." Olivia, surprising everyone, including herself, leaned in and hugged the old man. "No, Mr. Thompson, it's I who should thank you. You taught me to see beyond money, to understand the true value of the land and community." The following day saw a constant stream of visitors, local farmers, project investors, even government officials came to say goodbye to Harold and express their gratitude for his revolutionary vision. A week after that conversation, on a quiet Sunday morning, Harold Thompson closed his eyes for the last time, surrounded by his family and with a peaceful smile on his face. Harold's funeral was a celebration of his life and legacy. Hundreds of people came to Oak Grove to bid farewell to the man who had revolutionized agriculture in the region. Instead of flower wreaths, attendees brought seeds and small trees to plant on the farm, a living symbol of the future that Harold had helped to sow. Sarah, with Jake by her side, gave an emotional speech, remembering her grandfather, not just as the visionary innovator that the world knew, but as the loving and wise man who had raised her. "My grandfather used to say that the land doesn't judge. It only bears fruit for those who work it with respect and dedication," Sarah said, her voice broken with emotion but full of determination. "Today, as we bid him farewell, we commit ourselves to continuing his work. The irrigation system he developed is not just a technological innovation, it's a testament to his love for this land and its people." Olivia, standing among the crowd, felt a mixture of grief and deep gratitude. In the few months she had truly known Harold, the old man had transformed her view of the world and herself. After the funeral, life at Oak Grove had to continue. The irrigation system project demanded constant attention, and soon the team found themselves immersed in work, channeling their grief into the determination to make Harold's vision a reality. Sarah took on the role of leader in the agricultural aspect of the project, applying her engineering knowledge to further perfect the system. Jake took charge of business expansion, negotiating agreements with more farms and cooperatives across America. Olivia, for her part, surprised herself by taking a more active role in the community. She began organizing workshops for local farmers, teaching them not only about the new irrigation system, but also about financial management and sustainable development. A year after Harold's death, Oak Grove had transformed. What was once a family farm had become an internationally recognized center for agricultural innovation. Farmers from all over the United States, and even from other countries, came to learn about the revolutionary irrigation system and sustainable farming techniques that had been developed there. One afternoon, while overseeing the system's installation in a new section of the farm, Sarah felt a wave of nausea. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, but had attributed it to stress and hard work. However, this time was different. Jake, who was nearby reviewing some reports, noticed the paleness on his wife's face. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked, approaching with concern. Sarah looked at him, a mixture of surprise and joy in her eyes. "Jake, I think I'm pregnant." The news of Sarah's pregnancy spread quickly through Oak Grove, bringing a wave of joy to everyone. Olivia, excited at the prospect of being a grandmother, dedicated herself to preparing everything for the baby's arrival. "If it's a girl, I'd like to call her Harriet," Sarah said one night, as she, Jake, and Olivia were having dinner on the main house's porch. "In honor of Grandpa." Jake smiled, taking his wife's hand. "It's perfect. And if it's a boy, what do you think about Harold?" Olivia watched them, feeling a warmth in her heart that she once would have considered weakness. "Mr. Thompson would be so proud," she said softly, "of you, of the project, of everything we've accomplished." As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, the irrigation system project continued to expand. The U.S. government, impressed by the results, began implementing the system in arid regions of the country. International delegations regularly arrived at Oak Grove to study the system and its impact. One afternoon, as Sarah was resting on the porch, caressing her now swollen belly, Jake arrived with exciting news. "You're not going to believe this," he said, waving a paper in his hand. "The UN wants us to present the project at a conference on sustainable development in New York." Sarah smiled, excited, but also a little sad. "That's incredible, honey. Grandpa would be so proud. I wish he could be here to see it." Olivia, who was nearby arranging some flowers, approached. He is here, Sarah, in every plant that grows thanks to the system he developed, in every farmer whose life has improved, in the baby you carry in your womb. His legacy lives on in everything we do. Months passed, and the day of birth finally arrived. After hours of labor, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful girl. When they placed her in her arms, with Jake by her side and Olivia watching with tears of joy, Sarah immediately knew that the name they had chosen was perfect. "Welcome to the world, Harriet," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. In the years that followed, Oak Grove continued to flourish, both literally and figuratively. The irrigation system was implemented in countries around the world, helping to combat water scarcity and improving the lives of millions of farmers. Sarah and Jake had 2 more children, a boy they named Harold as planned, and another girl they named Olivia, in honor of their grandmother, who had become such an integral part of their lives and the project. Olivia, now in her 60s, found herself living a life she never would have imagined. She spent her days among the fields of Oak Grove, playing with her grandchildren and sharing her knowledge with new generations of farmers and innovators who came to the farm. One afternoon, as she watched little Harriet, now 5 years old, playing among the rows of corn, Olivia felt a familiar presence. She could almost see Harold there, smiling proudly at what his dream had become. "You were right, Mr. Thompson," Olivia murmured to the wind. "The land doesn't judge. It only bears fruit for those who work it with respect and dedication. And look at the fruits we've harvested." As the sun set over the fields of Oak Grove, bathing everything in a warm golden glow, Olivia felt a deep peace. Harold's legacy lived on, not just in the fields and the innovative irrigation system, but in the hearts of all those whose lives he had touched. And so in that small corner of California, a simple farm had become a beacon of hope and progress, a testament to the power of love for the land and one man's determination to make the world a better place. 10 years had passed since little Harriet's birth, and Oak Grove had transformed into a true center of agricultural innovation recognized worldwide. What was once a modest family farm was now a complex that included test fields, research laboratories, and a training center for farmers from all over the world. Sarah, now 40, had become a respected leader in the field of sustainable agriculture. Jake, with his business vision, had brought Harold's irrigation system to more than 50 countries, transforming the lives of millions of farmers. Their 3 children, Harriet, Harold, and Olivia, were growing up surrounded by innovation and respect for the land. Olivia, at 70, proudly observed how Harold's legacy had flourished beyond her wildest dreams. Although she no longer actively participated in the daily management of the project, she remained an invaluable mentor and guide to everyone at Oak Grove. One spring morning, as Olivia was having her coffee on the porch, she saw young Harriet, now 15, walking pensively among the fields. She watched her stop in front of the old oak tree that gave the farm its name, where Harold's ashes had been scattered years ago. Intrigued, Olivia approached her granddaughter. "What are you doing out here so early, my dear?" she asked softly. Harriet turned to her grandmother, her eyes bright with excitement. "Grandma, I think I've had an idea. Do you remember the stories you told me about great-grandpa Harold and how he developed the irrigation system?" Olivia nodded, a nostalgic smile on her lips. "Of course, those stories are part of our legacy." "Well," Harriet continued, "I've been thinking, great-grandpa's system revolutionized the way we use water in agriculture. But with climate change getting worse, we need to go further. I've been researching carbon sequestration in soil, and I think we could integrate that with our irrigation system." Olivia listened attentively as her granddaughter explained her idea, a system that not only optimized water use, but also increased the soil's capacity to capture carbon, thus combating climate change while improving agricultural production. "It's a brilliant idea, Harriet," said Olivia, her heart swelling with pride. "You remind me so much of your great-grandfather. Always looking to the future, always seeking ways to do things better." Harriet smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Do you think Mom and Dad will let me work on this? I know I'm young, but—" "Of course they will," Olivia interrupted. "Let's go talk to them right now." That same afternoon, Harriet presented her idea to Sarah, Jake, and Oak Grove's research team. The conference room, with its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the fields, was filled with expectation. Sarah and Jake listened in amazement as their eldest daughter explained her vision. The passion in her voice, the clarity of her ideas, inevitably reminded them of Harold. When Harriet finished her presentation, there was a moment of silence. Then, Sarah stood up and hugged her daughter. "I'm so proud of you, my dear," she said with tears in her eyes. "Your great-grandfather would be delighted." Jake, equally moved, added, "It's a fantastic idea, Harriet. And you're right, it's the next logical step for our project." In the months that followed, Oak Grove became an even greater hive of activity. Harriet, with the support of her parents and the research team, immersed herself in developing her idea. The young woman proved to have not only her great-grandfather's innovative vision, but also her mother's determination and her father's business acumen. Olivia observed all of this with a mixture of pride and amazement. One afternoon, as she watched Harriet working in the laboratory, she found herself remembering that day so many years ago when she had arrived at Oak Grove intending to buy the land for a resort project. "Life has curious ways of teaching us," she murmured to herself, repeating the words Harold had once told her. As Harriet's project progressed, Oak Grove began to attract even more international attention. Scientists, environmentalists, and world leaders came to see the pioneering work being done. One day, Olivia received news that filled her with indescribable emotion. The Oak Grove project, including Harriet's innovation, had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of its contribution to global food security and the fight against climate change. The award ceremony in Oslo was a moment of immense emotion for the entire family. Sarah and Jake, along with Harriet, went up on stage to accept the prize. Olivia, sitting in the front row, couldn't contain her tears of joy. In her acceptance speech, Sarah spoke passionately about her grandfather's legacy and how a simple idea born on a small California farm had grown to impact the entire world. "This award," Sarah said, her voice full of emotion, "is not just for us. It's for every farmer who has adopted these techniques, for every scientist who has contributed to their development, and above all, it's for my grandfather, Harold Thompson, whose vision and love for the land brought us here." Then, to everyone's surprise, Sarah called Harriet to the podium. The young woman, with a maturity beyond her years, spoke about the future of agriculture and the importance of innovation in the fight against climate change. "The work we do at Oak Grove," Harriet said, "is not just about technology or science. It's about hope. Hope for a future where no one goes hungry, where our planet is healthy, where innovation and tradition work hand in hand to create a better world." As Harriet spoke, Olivia felt as if time was folding in on itself. She saw in her granddaughter Harold's spirit, Sarah's passion, Jake's vision, and something totally unique and Harriet's own. It was as if all the generations of Oak Grove had come together in this young woman, carrying their legacy towards an even brighter future. After the ceremony, the family returned to Oak Grove, where they were received as heroes. The farm filled with celebrations, not just for the prize, but for everything it represented. The triumph of a vision, the realization of a dream that had begun with a humble farmer and his love for the land. In the years that followed, Oak Grove continued to grow and evolve. Harriet's system, which combined efficient irrigation with carbon sequestration, was implemented on farms around the world, helping to simultaneously combat hunger and climate change. Sarah and Jake, now in their 50s, began delegating more responsibilities to the new generation. Harriet became the director of research and development, while her brother Harold took charge of the project's international expansion. Young Olivia, the youngest of the siblings, showed a special talent for communication and became the project's spokesperson, taking Oak Grove's message to every corner of the world. Olivia, now in her 80s, observed all of this with a mixture of wonder and satisfaction. One afternoon, as she sat in her favorite rocking chair on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields of Oak Grove, she felt a familiar presence beside her. "Can I sit with you, Grandma?" asked Harriet, now a young woman of 25. "Of course, my dear," Olivia replied with a smile. They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the peace of the sunset. "Grandma," Harriet finally said, "there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time." What was it like before? I mean, before all this started, when you were just a businesswoman from the city." Olivia smiled, her eyes losing themselves on the horizon as memories flowed. "Oh, Harriet, I was a very different person then. I was so focused on success, on making money, that I had forgotten what really mattered." She told her granddaughter about that day in the San Francisco boutique, about how she had treated Harold, about how she had come to Oak Grove intending to buy the land for a resort project. "You know," said Olivia, her voice soft with nostalgia, "your great-grandfather taught me more in a few months than I had learned in my entire life. He taught me about the real value of things, about the importance of respecting the land and the people who work it." Harriet listened attentively, fascinated by this part of the family history she had never heard before. "What we've achieved here," Olivia continued, "goes far beyond technological innovation or business success. We've created a legacy of love for the land, of respect for tradition, and of vision for the future. And it all began with an old farmer who refused to give up, who saw possibilities where others only saw obstacles." Harriet took her grandmother's hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you, Grandma, for sharing this with me, and for everything you've done to make Oak Grove what it is today." Olivia smiled, gently squeezing her granddaughter's hand. "No, my dear. Thank you and your siblings for carrying this legacy into the future. Seeing what Oak Grove has become, makes me feel that my life has had a true purpose." As the sun disappeared over the horizon, tinting the sky in golden and pink hues, Olivia felt a deep peace. She had lived to see Harold's dream not only come true, but grow and evolve beyond what anyone could have imagined. Oak Grove, which was once a simple farm, was now a symbol of hope for the world. A testament to how love for the land, combined with innovation and dedication, could change the world. Olivia closed her eyes, letting the cool evening breeze caress her face. She could almost feel Harold's presence, his proud smile, his indomitable spirit that lived on in every plant, in every drop of water wisely used, in every life touched by his vision. "We did it, Mr. Thompson," she whispered to the wind. "We did it." And so, as the stars began to appear in the twilight sky, Oak Grove prepared for another day. Another day of innovation, of caring for the land, of hope for the future. Another day in the eternal legacy of a humble farmer who dared to dream big,